Alright, hey, what's up, y'all? So it's Tuesday or whatever. It's kind of gloomy outside. It's just kind of weird. It gets sunny in the day and hot, and then it gets gloomy and rainy and foggy or whatever. I also apologize for any background noise. Anyway, in the vein of some of the things that I've been saying recently, namely, accepting that you might be wrong, I came to kind of a strange conclusion this morning, something that's a little different for me, which is that there may be some things that I was assuming about life that I shouldn't have been assuming. Now, I'm not saying this to like take back anything that I've said in the past, because that's not really what this is about. It's more, I think there's more to it, right? So, a lot of the stuff, I've been operating under the assumption that there are certain logical rules that are never broken. And yet, it's actually kind of funny, because sometimes you'll come to a conclusion in one sort of thread, and then in a totally separate mental thread, you'll come to a different conclusion, and you'll realize that your conclusion from the first thread is no good because of the second one. So, I'll see if I can explain this quickly and succinctly and in a way that will make sense, so you can kind of get where my mind's at here. So, for the last couple of months, there's been this other thought on my mind. It has nothing to do with all this logic junk. But it is, it's kind of revolving around this philosophical theory of the observer, where if it were possible for someone to remove themselves from time and space, then theoretically they'd be able to travel back and forth in time, not because they're moving back and forth in time, but because all of time is present for them. It's kind of like Neil deGrasse Tyson did a good job of explaining it in some of the stuff he talked about with Interstellar, the movie. Because what happens is Matthew McConaughey's character basically is removed from time, and that's how he can see all of the events from all time inside that room at the same time. It's because to him, outside of the dimension of time, all of the moments were in front of him. So it's like he had eternity essentially to do what he needed to do. Well, one of the main theories there is that time is linear and that there is a timeline, meaning it's possible, and you would see the past and the future as present in this timeline. The implication of that, unfortunately, for me, and I don't really like this implication, is that we don't really make choices. Because if you can step outside of time and look at it, and while you're outside of time looking at it, you can see the end and the beginning, you can see the past and the future all in front of you, then what's going to happen in the future is already set somehow. I don't know how to explain how or why, but if it's true that you can see all of the past and all of the future from this vantage point, then it has to also be true that that it's already all set. Meaning, if you could step outside of it, this is kind of hard to grasp, but if you could step outside of it, and if it's true that when you step outside of it, you can see everything, all of time, then that means that for me right now, in this moment in time, the future is already set. Because if I could step out of time, I would be able to see the future. And to see the future is to know what's going to happen, which means it's already determined. Right? So, I don't really like that. And this whole thought comes from the fact that I don't like the idea that I'm not really making choices, that my whole life is sort of already preset, right? I don't really like that idea. And so I was thinking, and I thought, well, what if it's not that the observer sees all of time in a straight sort of linear fashion? Meaning, what if it's not that all the moments in the past are in a straight line, and then all the moments in the future are in a straight line? You can just sort of read through them, kind of like a book, where they're all just sort of laying out. It's kind of like if you take every moment in time and then draw a picture of the entire universe at that moment, then you'd have a book of history, essentially. And that's kind of the way that theory works. Well, my thought was, what if it's not that... Well, my thought was, I don't like that I'm not making choices. So how can I resolve this in such a way so that I'm actually making choices, and it makes a difference, the choices that I make? What I came up with is the fact that all of the possible choices that I could make have to exist from the observer's perspective in order for me to have the ability to choose them. Meaning, if I'm in this moment, then the next moment in time, from the observer's perspective, has to include all of the possible options of the choices that I could make, right? Meaning, I'm in this moment, and I'm making choices, and the choice that I make determines what the next moment is. But all of those choices that I don't make, those have to exist from the observer's perspective in order for me to actually be choosing between them. Because if those choices don't exist, meaning if the moment where I chose something else doesn't exist, then there's no possible way for me to ever make that choice because it doesn't exist, right? And I apologize, this is kind of heady stuff, but the problem with that I realized is that if it's true, if that's true, and this, by the way, this came up because of a comment on a different video that I had that got me thinking, and I realized I had kind of already suspected that this was going to happen when I was thinking through this, and then today in the sauna after I worked out, it sort of clicked, and it kind of got me kind of scared. So here's the thing: if it's true that all of my choices, all of the possible choices that I could make they exist from the observer's perspective, meaning I have the ability to make choices between them, then in that sphere where the observer exists outside of space and time, there are certain logical principles that don't apply. For example, Brett woke up at 5 o'clock this morning is a statement. It happens to be true of today. But if it's true that all of my possible decisions are also existing from the observer's perspective, then it's also true that it's also not true that Brett got up at 5 a.m. this morning. Which means from the observer's perspective, it's possible for a statement to be both true and false, and neither true nor false at the same time. Which is mind-boggling, because that's like the most basic fundamental logical principle, one of the most basic fundamental logical principles after if A is true, then A is true, is that if A is true, then A is not true, right? That's a straight up logical principle. If you can prove that A is not true, then that means necessarily that A is true. So anyway, so if it's possible in this other realm where the observer exists to both experience and observe and perceive a statement being true and a statement being false at the same time, then it changes the way you can, like, I used to think you could make a lot of you could use logic to determine how that realm would exist, right? The realm outside of space and time. But if it turns out that realm is outside of logic as well, then it gets all kinds of crazy, right? So maybe, now I know that theoretically, I mean, I can say, and in my mind I can conceive of a situation where A is both true and false, and it's neither true nor false, right? In my mind I can do that. So maybe that's the resolution, is that in your mind you can make those. It's theoretically conceivable that could be possible, but maybe not actually in practice or something, or maybe, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. But I think the point of this video today is less to make a point and more to reiterate my old points, which are, at any moment you could come across some information that proves you wrong. And if you are not willing to accept that this new information that you've come across means that you're wrong, then you never learn, you never progress. Now that doesn't mean, I know that a lot of you are just getting really nervous by me saying that, because that means that one of the potential implications there is you read something, like for example, Mormons are particularly terrified of this. They never want to read anti-Mormon literature, which I don't recommend. I think it's a waste of time. Anti-anything is going to be like, you know what you're going to get when you read it. But that doesn't mean that everything they say is bogus, because a lot of things that they say are spot on, and you almost should be reading that, because if you're, I'll speak in Mormon speak here, if your testimony can't withstand a little bit of, lashing, then you need to work on it. But I think that it's very important to always consider all new data when making arguments and making assumptions, because anything could come in, and you don't know everything. Like, I don't know everything. I make assumptions and I make arguments based on what I know, based on what I've perceived, based on the logical conclusions that I've come to. But at any moment, someone could say something, and I could be like, you know what? I never considered that. Let me consider that now. And it may or may not change my mind. In this instance, it didn't change my mind as much as actually made it more. Now I have to keep thinking about this and take it all the way through. So anyway, kind of interesting thought for today. But the lesson that I take away from it is never stop. Never stop questioning. Never stop considering. Never stop wondering. Because there's an infinite amount of knowledge that you can come to if you just put the mental energy into it. So, peace out.